the unforgiving plains of 1870s Texas, destiny draws together two broken lives from opposite worlds, a widow standing at the edge of death, and an Apache warrior who has already buried everything he once loved. What begins as survival becomes something neither expected, a fragile chance at redemption. Their bond defies blood borders and belief, forging a legacy that will echo far beyond the open land that first brought them together. The Texas sun bore down on Lila Boone like a silent verdict. Dust coated her split lips and clung to the torn fabric of what had once been a respectable dress, now ruined and marked by loss. 28 years of living had never prepared her for this kind of emptiness, this absolute erasure. The horizon wavered ahead of her, endless and cruel. Possibility shimmered like a lie, dissolving with every unsteady step. Her fingers brushed the small locket resting against her throat, hidden beneath her collar. Inside it lay a curl of hair. One last whisper of a life that no longer existed. The metal scorched her skin as if carrying its own heat. 3 days without water, or maybe 4. Time had melted into a blur, like ink washed away by rain. Lila's world had narrowed to movement, alone, one step, then another. The plains stretched on, vast and merciless, reducing her to something painfully small. Memories drifted through her fading thoughts. Laughter around a wooden table, hands folded in prayer, fields that once promised harvest and safety. All of it was gone now, reduced to ash and scattered by the wind. Fever settled deep into her bones, turning her blood to fire. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet, as though the land itself had decided to cast her out. Darkness crept into her vision, slow and gentle, a welcome end. When she fell, Lila Boone did not beg for mercy. She no longer believed it existed. Her body collapsed onto the hard earth without resistance. Her cheek pressed against soil scented with sage and drought. As awareness slipped away, a strange calm settled over her. Returning to dust felt appropriate, complete. She did not see the rider approaching at dusk, did not hear the hooves, did not feel the shadow that fell across her still form. She did not know her ending was about to become a beginning. Consciousness returned in fragments, first the sensation of movement, of being lifted, then the smell of smoke and worn leather. Finally, low voices speaking words she could not understand. Her eyes opened to firelight and shadow. The shelter around her was unlike anything she had known. A circular lodge of stretched hides rose above her, smoke curling upward through an opening in the roof, carrying prayers or secrets into the night. Fear seized her chest, sharp and sudden. Apache. The word struck her like a wound, dragging with it every story whispered since childhood, tales of savagery, of heathens lurking beyond the edge of civilization. She tried to sit up, but her body failed her, weakened by fever and starvation. A figure moved beside her, and she flinched. The man's face was carved by wind and sun lines, etched deep around eyes as dark as the night sky. Neither young nor old, he carried the weight of experience in the way he stood. Without speaking, he offered her a small vessel of water. His movements were slow, deliberate, careful not to frighten her further. She hesitated, her thirst battling terror. The man waited, patient as the land itself. When she finally took the vessel with shaking hands, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a strange jolt through her weakened body. Lila drank. The water was cool, clean, alive. Why, the word slipped from her lips, barely audible. He studied her face, unreadable. Though he could not understand her language, he seemed to grasp her meaning. He touched his chest. Tarek. Then he gestured toward her, tilting his head in question. Lila. She whispered the name, sounding foreign, even to herself. Voices rose outside the lodge, sharp with agitation. Tarek glanced toward the entrance, his jaw tightening. An older woman appeared, her expression carved from disapproval. Her words struck like thrown stones, directed squarely at Lila. Tarek answered calmly but firmly. The woman's dark eyes fixed on Lila, sharp enough to cut through skin and bone. She spat a final remark before disappearing into the night. In the silence that followed the distance between Lila's world and this one felt immeasurable. Tarek placed a small bundle of herbs beside her bedding, his hands precise, careful, the touch of a healer. That night, fever dragged Lila into restless dreams, her husband's grave smoke rising from the ruins of her home. Yet among those familiar ghosts appeared a new figure, eyes dark as the sky, offering water to a woman who should have died. Days passed in a haze of heat and broken awareness. Slowly, Lila Boone began to recognize the sounds around her. Children's laughter drifted through the camp, sharp and alive, mixing with the steady murmur of women at work and the low, measured rhythm of Tarek's voice as he spoke among his people. Over time, Lila Boone came to understand that he was known not only by name, but by reputation. A man called Tarek. A name spoken with respect and a trace of distance, as though solitude clung to him by design. Her strength returned slowly, cautiously, like a wounded animal edging back into the open. With it came clarity. She understood now that she was an outsider in a place that did not welcome strangers, least of all those with skin like hers. Each morning, the older woman entered the lodge to inspect her recovery. Sani, Tarek's mother. Her presence carried the weight of judgment without words. She moved stiffly, shaped by years of loss and endurance. Her hands were knotted with age, yet steady and capable. Those hands changed Lila's bandages with brisk efficiency, as if fulfilling a duty rather than offering care. One morning, Sani set a wooden bowl beside her, steam rising from the stew within. When Lila reached for it, their eyes locked. Sani pressed a hand to her own chest. "Sani," she said, her voice rough as stone on stone. The name, offered without warmth, still bridged a distance. Lila inclined her head and repeated it carefully. "Sani." The woman's expression remained guarded, but something shifted. No kindness. Not yet, but less resistance. Later that day, when Tarek returned from hunting, Lila sat at the edge of the lodge, watching the camp breathe around her. Children ran between shelters. Women scraped hides and stirred pots. Men spoke in low clusters, their voices blending into the afternoon air. Tarek approached quietly, carrying a bundle wrapped in hide, and sat beside her, leaving deliberate space between them. From the bundle he drew out a small carving, a bird with wings, stretched wide-shaped, from pale wood. He placed it in her open palm and gently closed her fingers around it. "Tarek," he said, touching his chest, then the carving. "Eagle," Lila murmured, tracing the smooth wings with her fingertip. "Eagle." She touched his arm lightly. "Thank you." He nodded. He understood the meaning, even if the words escaped him. Then he pointed to objects nearby, naming them, in his language: stone, fire, sky, water, pausing each time, waiting for her to repeat the sounds. The lesson unfolded quietly until the sun sank low, stretching shadows across the camp. That night, Lila fell asleep with the wooden eagle warm in her hand. It was solid, real. The first gift she had received since burying her husband beneath Texas soil. Before dawn, the camp stirred with unfamiliar urgency. Lila stepped out from Tarek's lodge, where she had been given her own space since arriving, and sensed the tension immediately. Men were rounding up horses. Women packed with swift precision. Tarek appeared beside her, his expression hard. He gestured toward the horizon, sweeping his arm outward. They were leaving. Panic tightened in Lila's chest. She was stronger now, but still fragile, still dependent on the uneasy tolerance of these people. Tarek seemed to read her fear. He pointed to a sturdy mare with a dappled coat, then to her. Before she could speak, shouting erupted from the far edge of camp. A boy ran toward them, breathless words spilling fast. Tarek's posture shifted instantly, alert, coiled, dangerous. Lila felt the threat before she understood it. Settlers, or worse, ironcoats, men who would see her as a captive in need of rescue. The Apache as enemies to be erased. The truth struck her with sudden clarity. She did not want to be rescued. The camp moved faster. Lila stepped toward the mare, then stopped. This was a choice. She could wait, reveal herself, return to the world, she had lost. Tarek watched her without pressure, without demand. He would not bind her to this path. She thought of what awaited her beyond the plains, pity whispers, a life stripped bare, a widow with nothing to claim and nowhere to belong. Here she had been given life when death had already claimed her. She mounted the mare, stiff but steady. Tarek met her gaze, the question clear in his eyes. Layla nodded once. They rode north beneath the rising sun, the camp flowing forward like a living current of people and animals. Layla stayed close to Tarek, aware of every glance, some curious, others sharp with doubt. Sani rode nearby, spine straight, despite her years, her profile carved against the sky. By midday the plains gave way to broken land. Juniper and scrub oak clung to rocky slopes as Tarek led them onward into a hidden valley guarded by towering stone walls on three sides. A place carved for survival. A narrow stream curved through the heart of the valley, catching the afternoon sun like molten silver. As the Apache camp settled into this hidden refuge, Lila Boone slid down from her horse, her legs shaking with spent strength. Tarek stepped toward her and offered a water skin. Their fingers met as she took it, and this time she did not recoil. He gestured toward the valley, his voice low. Wahatu. Safe. Lila turned slowly, taking in the stone walls, the water, the sheltering rise of land. Safe, she repeated, though the word felt uncertain even as it left her mouth. That night beneath stars, she did not recognize Lila. Pressed the wooden eagle against her chest. She had chosen to run with those she had once been taught to fear. What that made her traitor fool or something else she could not yet name. Summer gave way to autumn and the land burned gold and copper. Her days found a rhythm. Mornings were spent with the women, learning to cook over open fire, to soften hides, to gather plants that healed and sustained. Hands once shaped by settler comforts grew rough and capable. Sani Tarek's mother kept her distance, though the edge of hostility dulled. When Lila stumbled through the Apache tongue, Sani corrected her with sharp gestures and little patience. Still, instruction lived within the criticism. Lila stored each word carefully, fire water, horse good, bad hunger, letting the strange sounds settle until patterns emerged. In the evenings, Tarek joined her. Where his mother was blunt, he was steady and patient, sketching symbols in the dirt, shaping meaning with motion and quiet repetition. He spoke of his people, their beliefs, their past, how they understood the land, using few words and the clarity of his hands. One crisp afternoon, frost clinging to the shadows, Tarek guided Lila to a ridge overlooking the valley. Below them, the camp looked small beneath the open sky, thin trails of smoke lifting straight into the air. He sat on a flat stone and motioned for her to sit beside him. From a pouch at his waist, he drew out a necklace that caught the light, smooth stones. Silver beads and a single eagle feather at its center. "My wife," he said in his language, the words no longer foreign to her. She wore this. Lila's breath caught. He had never spoken of a wife before. She had assumed from his solitude and the way others deferred to him that he had none. "What happened?" she asked carefully. Tarek's expression stayed calm, but his eyes darkened as though something passed beneath the surface. "White men," he said. He touched his chest. "Long ago. I was hunting. When I returned—" He did not finish. He did not need to. Lila felt his loss echo against her own. Without thinking, she unclasped the locket at her throat, opening it to reveal the curl of dark hair inside. "My husband," she said softly. "Fever took him. Then bandits came." She closed the locket, the click sharp in the stillness. They sat together as the sun slid low shadows, stretching across the valley. Grief filled the space between them, unspoken, shared. Words felt too small. Finally Tarek spoke, his voice meant only for her. "Life ends. Then after a pause, life begins." He placed the necklace in her hands, folding her fingers around it. "Not to replace," he said, "to remember." Lila looked down at the gift. It was not romance. It was recognition of loss and of what might still continue. That night she wore the necklace beneath her clothes, the feather resting over her heart. It felt private, chosen, a trust given. She was learning that hands often spoke more clearly than words. The first snow came early, turning the valley into a world of white silence. Cold crept into the lodge despite the fire frosting breath into the air and turning simple tasks into trials. Game grew scarce. Hunting parties returned with less each day. Faces sharpened, resolve hardening. Lila watched how food was divided. Children and elders fed first, nothing wasted, not a bone or scrap. Before, winter had meant inconvenience. Here it meant endurance. Survival counted in breaths. One night, as wind battered the lodge, Lila sat beside Sani, watching the older woman work hide into softness. Those hands fascinated her, gnarled, relentless, capable of both severity and precision, shaping something useful from what once was raw. "Show me," Lila Boone said in the Apache tongue, her accent uneven but clear enough to be understood. Sani lifted her gaze, dark eyes weighing the request. After a brief pause, she passed Lila another strip of hide and demonstrated the motion, slow, exact. When Lila faltered, Sani corrected her grip with firm fingers, a patience that surprised them both. Firelight flickered as they worked, and the older woman began to speak. Her voice steady, measured. She spoke of winters, long gone, of years when the buffalo were plenty, when her people moved without fences, hemming them in, before lines on paper claimed land that had never belonged to ink. The words built pictures in Lila's mind, a world unbroken by boundaries. Then Sani stopped, hands still. "My son should not have brought you," she said. The weight of it pressed hard. Not just Layla, her skin, her past, all of it. She could not deny the truth behind the accusation. "I am not my kind," Lila answered carefully. "I am only myself." Sani gave a short, dismissive sound. "A wolf cub raised by horses is still a wolf." "What am I meant to do?" Lila asked, holding her gaze. "I cannot change what I am." "No," Sani said, returning to her work. "But you can choose what you become." The words stayed with Lila as a winter tightened its grip, as supplies thinned and hunger settled in like a constant ache. She watched how Tarek's people endured scarcity with quiet dignity, sharing what little they had, finding reasons to laugh even as belts were pulled tighter. One morning, Lila woke with a memory so vivid it felt present, her father's farm in a drought year. She remembered how he had found wild roots that kept them alive until the rains returned. She had followed him through fields gone dry, learning which plants survived when others failed. Purpose took hold. Lila sought out Tarek. Using the words she knew and her hands when words failed, she explained. He listened, thoughtful, then nodded once. The next day, Lila led a small group of women to places where the snow lay thinnest. With borrowed tools, she broke the frozen earth and pulled free the knotted roots she remembered. Ugly little things, but nourishing if prepared right. That evening, the camp ate stew made from her find. It wasn't plenty. It wasn't meat. But it was enough. As bowls passed, Lila felt Sani's eyes on her, not approving, not warm, but reconsidering. Later, as Layla settled for the night, Sani approached. Without a word, she pressed something into Lila's palm, a small buffalo carving, smoothed by years of touch. "My husband made it," Sani said, her voice rough with what went unspoken. "When food is scarce, we keep it close to call the buffalo back." She touched Lila's arm, brief, deliberate. "You have eyes for what others miss." It was not acceptance, not yet. But it was acknowledgement. All through winter, Lila kept the carving near a guard against hunger, a fragile bridge across difference. Slowly the world softened. Ice gave way under the steady sun, snow breaking into rivulets that cut paths down the slopes. Lila watched the valley change with quiet wonder. Surviving her first winter among the Apache made each green shoot feel earned. Her body changed with the seasons, leaner, stronger skin darkened by wind and light. Hands once soft now carried the marks of work and intent. Sometimes her reflection in still water startled her. The language, too, had shifted. She dreamed in a blend of English and Apache boundaries, blurring in sleep. Awake, she thought in her adopted tongue, reaching for English only when needed. As the valley bloomed, she felt the camp's regard shift. Children who once stared from afar now asked questions. Women drew her into their circles without hesitation. Even the men once distant offered small nods of recognition. A few eyes stayed hard, those who had lost most to white advance. Suspicion remained unmoved. One bright morning, Tarek found Lila by the stream, gathering tender shoots for food and medicine. He carried his bow and quiver, dressed to hunt. "Come," he said. She followed him up a winding path through juniper and oak leaves fresh with spring. They walked in easy silence, steps finding a shared rhythm. At the ridge, Tarek stopped and looked out over the land, stretching wide and open. "I was born far from here," he said, his voice carrying on the clean air. "My people moved with the buffalo," Tarek said, sweeping his hand toward the far plains. "We followed their trails." His gesture slowed. "Now the buffalo grow scarce." He spoke of the white man's iron horse of rails cutting the land, bringing hunters and settlers in numbers the earth could not bear. Lila Boone felt the familiar weight settle in her chest, the burden of belonging to the people who had caused such change. "I'm sorry," she said. The words felt small, but they were honest. Tarek looked at her, something easing in his expression. "You are not accountable for all your people," he said quietly, "as I am not for mine." He touched the eagle feather that rested at her throat, the necklace she now wore without hiding it. Each person answers for their own path. He turned and pointed to a stand of trees some distance away. "Do you see the deer?" Layla narrowed her gaze. At first there was nothing, only shadow and bark, then a shift, movement, the faint outline of a deer's head nearly lost in the brush. "Your eyes are sharpening," Tarek said, warmth in his voice. "When you first came, you would have seen only trees." He held out his bow, the offer clear. Lila hesitated, then took it, feeling the smooth curve of the wood, the living tension in the string. She had watched hunts, seen how game was dressed and shared. But this was different, an invitation to step inside the act itself. Tarek adjusted her stance with careful hands, set her grip, showed her how to nock the arrow. His chest brushed her back as he guided her aim, his breath warm near her ear. The closeness sent heat to her cheeks. "Breathe," he murmured. "Look past what you think you see." Lila focused, drawing the strings he had taught her. The deer grazed unaware, sunlight breaking over its coat. Tarek's presence behind her felt steady grounding. Release. The arrow flew wide of the mark. The deer sprang away in a flash of motion. Lila lowered the bow, disappointment biting sharp. Tarek's hand settled on her shoulder. "The first arrow rarely feeds the people," he said. "It is the 100th that does." As they returned to camp, Lila felt a strange lightness. She had missed the deer, but struck something else entirely. In teaching her to hunt, Tarek had given her a chance not just to survive, but to provide. That evening, as fires ringed the camp and the day's successful hunts were shared, Tarek sat closer to her than usual. The warmth of him went beyond the fire, settling around her, like shelter against the night. Across the flames, Sani watched them, her lined face unreadable in the shifting light. Summer brought a visitor to the hidden valley, a trader known among the Apache, a man of mixed blood who walked easily between worlds. His pack horses were heavy with goods, his arrival noticed long before he reached camp. Lila observed from the entrance of Tarek's lodge as the stranger was greeted. He spoke Apache with ease, though his clothing blended native and white styles, a living mark of divided belonging. The men gathered close, hungry for news beyond the valley. Later during the feast held in his honor, Lila felt his gaze linger on her, measuring, curious. Being seen again as different unsettled her. The woman with hair like autumn grass, the trader said in English, his voice carrying across the fire. They speak of you in the settlements. Lila stiffened her fingers, brushing the eagle feather at her throat. What do they say? Her English felt unfamiliar after months of silence. That you were taken, he replied. That you're being held against your will. His eyes, sharp and dark, studied her. Some claim grief drove you mad to live among savages. The word sent a ripple through those who understood it. Tarek remained still, but Lila felt the tension gather in him. They're wrong, she said, her voice steady. I was saved, not stolen. I stay, because I choose to. The trader nodded, a knowing smile touching his mouth. As I thought. He shifted into Apache, addressing the gathered people. The Ironcoats are moving closer to these mountains. A murmur swept the circle, anger, fear, weary acceptance. They speak of forcing all Apache onto the reservation by winter. Lila looked to Tarek and saw the hardness in his jaw, the shadow in his eyes. He had told her of the reservation's lands chosen by others, where a people were expected to abandon the ways that had sustained them. That night when the camp fell quiet, Lila found Tarek standing at the edge of the valley, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon as if measuring what might soon be taken and what must be defended. She came to stand beside him without a word. Night lay soft around them, scented with juniper and sage. The sky stretched wide above, stars spilling like a river across the dark. You could leave with him, Tarek said at last, his voice low. Return to your people. A chill passed through Lila Boone, untouched by the night air. Do you want me to go? He turned then, his face half lit by starlight. What I want is not the measure, he said. The road ahead grows dangerous. The reservation. He searched for words. It is a slow death. For my people. For you. I will not go there by choice, he continued, certainty in his tone. Some of us will find another way. Lila thought of what waited beyond the mountains. Pity, perhaps. Or contempt for crossing lines, for choosing a life others could not understand. She had no family left, no place to return to. Among the Apache, despite her difference, she had earned purpose. Respect shaped by work and something deeper, something that tightened in her chest whenever Tarek stood near. My place is here, she said quietly, if you will have me. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers threading through her own. It was the first time he had reached for her, and the warmth of his skin sent a steady current through her. The path will be hard, he warned, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand. Lila thought of the winter they had survived, of the skills she now carried, of the strength she had discovered. Few paths worth walking are easy. When he spoke again, his voice had changed deeper. Among my people, a man who seeks a woman as his wife speaks to her father. He offers horses for her worth. He paused. You have no father here, and I have few horses. Heat rose to Lila's face, her heart pounding. I have no need of horses. Tarek turned fully to her, taking both her hands. In his eyes she saw the stars reflected, and something more, a question held open. Then I ask you, Lila Boone, woman of strong heart, he said, to join your path with mine, to be my wife, to share what comes good or ill. The night seemed to still. Lila thought of everything between them. Language, history, blood, and everything that had drawn them together in spite of it. Yes, she said, barely louder than the breath. Then in his tongue, Ha'ata, I will. Tarek's hands tightened his face, breaking into a smile that reached his eyes. Beneath the stars, Lila felt the last threads binding her to her former life fall away. The woman who had collapsed in Texas dust, ready for death, no longer existed. In her place stood someone remade strength, born from breaking and choosing again. With dawn came preparation. Lila found herself surrounded by emotion women, bringing garments heavy with beadwork, smoothing her hair with fragrant oils, painting symbols on her skin, whose meanings she was only beginning to grasp. Sani guided it all with an unexpected gentleness, her usual bluntness softened by the day's weight. As she fastened a necklace of polished shells around Lila's throat, her hands lingered. "My son has been alone too long," she said, emotion rough in her voice. "You have brought light back to his eyes." Lila swallowed her throat tight. "He gave me life when mine was gone," she replied in Apache, the words coming more easily now. "I will honor that gift." Sandy nodded, once satisfaction flickering in her dark eyes. "You speak like one of the people." She adjusted the ceremonial dress, precise and careful. Not yet fully ours, but no longer apart. The ceremony itself was simple yet heavy with meaning. The tribe gathered in a wide circle, witnesses to joined paths. Tarek stood tall, dressed in his finest, a single eagle feather set in his hair. Kesh, the tribal elder, spoke blessings calling on earth and sky, on ancestors watching beyond the veil. Gifts were exchanged. Lila placed the locket containing her first husband's hair into Tarek's hands, a release of what had been. He gave her a knife with an antler-carved handle, a tool for survival, a sign of trust. As the words ended, a sense of rightness settled into Lila's bones. What once would have seemed impossible felt complete, not compromised. That night fires burned high. Drums and song filled the valley. Vance Holt, the trader, approached Lila, his face unreadable in the shifting light. "They will never understand," he said quietly. "Your people will call you many things, none of them kind." Lila met his gaze without wavering. "They are no longer my people," Lila Boone said quietly. "Not in the ways that matter. And if soldiers come, if they believe they must rescue me, I will tell them what I tell you now. I am exactly where I choose to be." Vance Holt searched her face, then gave a slow nod. "There is another rite that could help," he said. "One recognized by white law, performed by a man of God. It would give your union standing in the eyes of those who might otherwise tear it apart." Lila weighed his words. Such a ceremony held no spiritual meaning for her now. Her heart had already been given in the Apache way. Still, it could serve as a shield, something to blunt the hands of those who would see only a white woman in need of saving. When she brought the idea to Tarek, he listened with the same careful attention he always gave her. "This ceremony of your former people," he said, "considering it would strengthen our joining against those who would break it. It might," Lila agreed, "in their eyes if not in ours." Tarek thought, then nodded. "Then we will do it if it brings you peace." 2 weeks later, a circuit-riding preacher was guided into the valley by the trader. The man's eyes widened when he saw Lila, recognition clear. But the payment offered ensured his cooperation, if not his comfort. The Christian ceremony was brief, held at the edge of camp with little adornment. Tarek repeated the unfamiliar vows with solemn care, his accent shaping the English into something new and steady. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Lila felt no change. What had transformed her life had already happened beneath the stars. Still, when the preacher wrote their names in his ledger, Lila Boone and Tarek, the act carried weight. Their bond now stood in two worlds, recognized by both Apache tradition and white law. That night in the lodge that was truly theirs, Tarek traced the curve of Lila's cheek with gentle fingers. "Two ceremonies," he said softly. "Two paths joined as one." "One heart," Lila whispered, leaning into his touch. "One future." Outside, the wind carried sage and juniper, autumn riding close. Inside, by firelight, they began the careful work of weaving two lives into one. Autumn dressed the valley in copper, gold, and rust, a beauty that hid the strain tightening through the camp. More traders arrived with troubling news. Ironcoats were building forts closer to their refuge. Settlers pressed into lands once thought unreachable. The weight of it settled into council talks, into longer hunts meant to store food for winter, into the women's hushed voices as they worked. The reservation loomed like a lengthening shadow as days shortened. One sharp morning, frost silvered the ground. Sentinels raised the alarm. Riders were coming. Too many for traders, moving with purpose. Tarek gathered the warriors, setting them to shield the camp. To Lila he gave clear instructions. If fighting comes, stay with my mother. Take her into the caves. She nodded and clasped his arm once before finding Sani. The old woman was already at work, bundling essentials with the practiced speed of someone who had fled danger before. From the camp's edge, Lila watched the riders approach soldiers in blue rifles catching the sun. Among them rode a man in civilian clothes, authority in his bearing. The soldiers stopped short. The civilian rode forward alone, halting where Tarek and several warriors waited. Lila could not hear their words, but she saw the man hand Tarek a document and saw the stiffness settle into Tarek's frame as he read. When Tarek turned back toward camp, his face was calm but hard. The soldiers stayed where they were watching. What do they want? Lila asked, as he reached her, keeping her voice low. They carry papers saying this land now belongs to the government, Tarek replied, measured. They command us to move to the reservation before the first snow. He glanced toward the waiting line of blue coats. The man in black is an Indian agent. He says there is a white woman among us, held against her will. They had come to free her. A cold, steady anger settled in Lila Boone's chest. I am not held against my will, she said. They will not accept that easily. Tarek replied. Not while you appear as you do. A white woman dressed as Apache. Lila's thoughts moved fast, weighing every risk. Let me speak to them, she said at last. Let me show them I stay by choice. Tarek searched her face, concern clear in his eyes. If you go to them, they may not allow you to return. Then come with me, she said, her hand brushing the knife he had given her, now worn at her waist. My husband. Together they walked toward the waiting agent. As they approached, Lila saw recognition spread across the man's face, not of her alone, but of what she represented. A white woman gone native. A tale whispered around settler fires with equal parts fear and fascination. Ma'am, the agent said, removing his hat. I'm Reed Lawson, Indian agent for this territory. We've come to escort you back to civilization. Lila met his gaze without flinching. I am Lila Boone Eagle, she said, using the name that joined her to her husband under white law. I am here by choice, married by Apache ceremony and by Christian rite. She gestured to Tarek at her side. This is my husband. Lawson's expression shifted confidence, giving way to doubt. Mrs. Eagle, if you're being coerced. I am not. Lila cut in, her voice sharp. I was found dying on the plains 2 years ago. The Apache saved my life when they had no reason to do so. I remain because I choose to remain. Lawson glanced at Tarek, whose face stayed calm, then back to Lila. The law is clear, ma'am. All Apache must relocate to the reservation. That includes you, if you insist on staying with your husband. She felt Tarek tense beside her, though he showed no anger. Lila stepped forward a fraction. My husband and several families intend to move north away from settled lands. We seek no conflict, only the right to live by our own ways. That is not permitted, Lawson said, though his tone softened slightly. Government policy is firm. All tribes must be settled on designated reservations. And if we refuse, Lila asked, already knowing the answer. Lawson gestured toward the line of ironcoats waiting behind him. Then force will be used, Mrs. Eagle. I would rather it not come to that. Silence pressed down on them. Lila felt the weight of the moment, lives balanced on a narrow edge. She thought of the women and children in camp of Sani, with her proud spine and weathered hands of the life she had chosen and built. Mr. Lawson, she said finally, her voice steady. You see before you a woman who has lived in both worlds. I know the reservation you offer disease, hunger. A place where the spirit of a people dies, even if their bodies endure. She paused, gathering resolve. Before you drive these people from their home, I ask you to spend 1 day among them. See how they live. Then decide whether what you call civilization is anything more than control dressed in finer words. Lawson hesitated, clearly unprepared. He looked back at the soldiers, then returned his gaze to Lila and Tarek. One day he said at last, "But my orders stand." After that, decisions must be made. As they walked back toward camp, Tarek's hand closed around Lila's, a quiet show of support. "You speak with a strong heart," he said softly. "Will it change anything?" she asked. "Perhaps not the government's course," Tarek replied. "But it gives us time to choose our own." That evening, the valley held its breath. While Reed Lawson was shown a careful, measured hospitality by the tribe, Lila Boone sat in council with Tarek and the other leaders. The choice before them was hard, yet the decision came without division. They would not go to the reservation. Instead, they would break into smaller bands, less visible, harder to follow, and move north into the mountains where few white men dared to travel. It was a risk. Winter pressed close, and the journey would test every strength they had. But it held one thing the reservation never could: freedom. Later, inside the quiet of their lodge, Lila helped Tarek prepare what they would carry. She wrapped the wooden eagle he had carved for her and tucked away the buffalo figure given by Sani. As she worked, Tarek watched her, his gaze thoughtful. "You could still leave with them," he said softly. "Return to your people. It would be safer." Lila straightened and met his eyes. "My people are here," she said, touching his chest. "My place is with you." Firelight softened his face. He took her hand and pressed it firmly over his heart. No words were needed. Between them stood a bond deeper than ceremony, a choice renewed in the face of danger. Outside, the wind whispered through the valley, carrying the first hint of snow. Change was coming, as certain as the turning seasons. Lila met it without fear, knowing she had found her true north, her center in a world of shifting borders. They left before dawn, slipping away in small groups, while Reed Lawson still slept in the lodge, prepared for him. The eastern sky faded into pearl gray as Lila, Tarek, Sani, and 7 others from their extended family crossed the ridge that had sheltered their valley home. Lila looked back once, committing every curve of the land to memory. Then she urged her horse forward, following Tarek into the unknown. The first days were tense. Every sound brought them to a halt, listening for pursuit. They moved through roughening terrain, following game trails and ancient paths known only to the elders. Tarek led with the ease of one who read land, as Lila had once read books, finding water where none seemed possible, uncovering safe routes through stone and brush. Sani rode with surprising endurance, her posture unbent, her eyes sharp for plants that could heal or feed them. Each night when they stopped, she beckoned Lila to help gather what the land offered, teaching woven with acceptance. "The mountains remember the old ways," Sani said one evening as they collected pine nuts beneath spreading branches. "Here perhaps we can live as the people were meant to live." Lila noticed the quiet power of the word "we." "I hope so," she replied, breath fogging in the cooling air. As they climbed higher, the cold sharpened. Snow dusted the peaks above them, warning of winter's reach. Game grew scarce, demanding longer hunts. Lila joined them, now her skill with bow and knife honed under Tarek's patient guidance. One clear morning, Tarek pointed toward a distant valley, cradled between protective ridges. A stream caught the sun like a silver thread, and the slopes bore signs of game. "There," he said. They made camp that afternoon, raising temporary shelters until sturdier lodges could be built. The work never ceased, gathering timber, shaping dwellings strong enough for mountain winds, preserving every scrap of food. Lila labored beside the others, her movements guided by necessity and shared purpose. The skills she had learned among the Apache served her well here, where survival depended on every hand. At night, exhausted but fulfilled, she lay beside Tarek in their shelter, his warmth steady against the mountain cold. Sometimes they spoke of the future they hoped to build. Other times they rested in silence, words unnecessary. When the first heavy snow sealed their new home from pursuit, Lila realized the journey had changed her once again. She had been reborn among the Apache. Now in this mountain refuge she was being remade, not merely surviving but helping shape something new. One evening, sitting near the fire with Tarek, Leela felt a sudden flutter low in her belly, like the brush of unseen wings. She pressed a hand there, breath-catching. Tarek noticed at once. "Are you unwell?" She shook her head slowly, wonder spreading as understanding took hold. I think I carry a child." His expression shifted to concern, giving way to quiet, overwhelming joy. He placed his hand beside hers as if hoping to feel the miracle himself. "A new life," he whispered. Sani, overhearing, stepped closer. Her gnarled fingers rested gently on Lila's abdomen. Her head tilted as though listening to secrets carried deep within. After a long moment, Sani gave a slow nod, approval settling into the lines of her weathered face. "Strong," she said at last. "A bridge between worlds." That night, as the wind sang around their shelter and firelight cast restless shadows along the walls, Lila Boone felt a deep calm settle into her bones. The road behind them had been hard, and the days ahead were still uncertain. Yet here, among those who had become her true family, she knew with absolute certainty that she stood exactly where she belonged. The child growing within her would not belong fully to one world or the other, but would carry something new, just as Lila herself had become. A bridge, as Sani had said. Not an ending, but a beginning. Outside, snow continued to fall, wiping away their tracks and laying the land under a clean, unbroken white. It felt as though the earth itself was granting them mercy, a blank page, a chance to write a new story in this far-off corner of the world. Spring arrived late in the mountains. Snow still clung to shaded slopes, even as soft green shoots pushed up in protected valleys. Lila's body had rounded with child, her movements slower, more careful as she learned to live within her changing shape. Tarek watched over her with quiet devotion. His concern showed in the way he anticipated her needs, in the steady warmth of his hand, resting against the swell of her belly. Their small community had not only endured the brutal winter, it had begun to flourish. Permanent lodges now stood in a wide protective circle, smoke rising into the endless sky. Hunting improved as they learned the habits of mountain game, and Lila identified edible plants that strengthened their stores. Most surprising of all others came to join them 3 families of mixed blood who had heard rumors of a place where those who belonged to both worlds, or neither, could live without fear. Among them was Willa Hart, married to Knox Hart, a man of Cherokee blood. She brought precious seeds and the knowledge to coax crops from the thin mountain soil during the short summer. Lila and Willa bonded almost instantly, their shared histories forging understanding where words alone could not. Together they broke ground in a sunny clearing, turning earth that may never have known cultivation. "I never thought I'd meet another woman like me," Willa admitted one morning as they worked side by side. "When I chose to marry Knox, my family cast me out. They said I was dead to them." Lila nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. "My family was already gone when I met Tarek," she said, resting a hand over her swollen belly. "But I've often wondered what they would have thought of the life I chose." Willa glanced toward the men nearby, building a storage lodge, one tall and copper-skinned, the other broader, marked by European features, yet working together with easy trust. "They might have surprised you," she said softly. "Love opens doors we never knew were there." As Lila's time drew close, Sani and the elder women prepared for the birth with solemn care. The birthing lodge was cleansed with sage smoke. Soft hides were laid for the bed. Prayers were offered to spirits Lila had come to respect, even if she could never fully name them. Labor began under a full moon. Lila faced it with the same fierce resolve that had carried her through every trial of her new life. Tarek stayed nearby, not inside the lodge, but close enough that his presence steadied her spirit. The pain was fierce and consuming, a fire that burned away what she once was and forged something stronger in its place. Sani's hands guided her, the old woman's voice calm and unwavering as Lila's body fought to bring new life into the world. When the child finally came, a daughter with her father's dark eyes and hair the color of late wheat. Her first cry split the night like a promise. Lila cradled the tiny body against her chest, stunned by the perfection of small fingers and the determined curve of the mouth. At dawn, as pale light touched the eastern sky, Tarek entered the lodge. He knelt beside her, awe written across his face as he looked upon his daughter. When he brushed the baby's cheek with one careful finger, his eyes spoke what words could not. "Ira," Lila whispered. "Her name is Ira." Then in the Apache tongue she spoke the name that carried the meaning of first light returning. Tarek nodded, his voice rough with feeling. "Born with the dawn." In the days that followed, as Lila regained her strength and learned the rhythms of motherhood, she saw how Ira changed the camp. The child became more than the daughter of two people. She became a living symbol of possibility. When Ira was 1 month old, a ceremony was held to welcome her fully among the people. Elders offered blessings. Small gifts were placed at her side: tiny moccasins, a rattle made from turtle shell, a miniature dress stitched with careful beadwork. Sani approached last, carrying something wrapped in soft hide. When she uncovered it, Lila saw a necklace smaller than her own, yet fashioned in the same way, a single eagle feather hanging at its center. "For a child of two worlds," Sani said, her voice clear in the ceremonial hush. "May she walk with the strength of both, the wisdom of both, and the heart of both." As the feather was placed around Ira's neck, tears filled Lila's eyes. She looked to Tarek and saw his emotion mirrored there, not only for their daughter, but for the life they had chosen together and the future they were now brave enough to claim. That night, with Ira sleeping soundly in a cradle, shaped by her father's hands, Lila Boone stood at the entrance of their lodge, lifting her eyes to the stars that felt close enough to touch in the thin mountain air. Tarek came up behind her, his arms settling around her waist, his warmth easing the bite of the cold. "Are you happy?" he asked, the question quiet but heavy with meaning. Lila leaned back against him, her thoughts tracing every step that had led her here, the losses that had hollowed her out, the chance meeting that had saved her life, the choices that had reshaped her soul. "Yes," she said at last, the word carrying the weight of certainty. "I am where I belong." Above them, the stars etched ancient paths across the sky. Below, within the circle of lodges, fires burned steady and bright, holding the darkness at bay. Inside their home, a child slept, living proof that borders could be crossed, that differences could be bridged, that love could shape something new, from worlds once thought incompatible. 5 years passed, seasons turning like the slow pages of a carefully written story. The mountain community grew stronger, its existence protected and shared only with those seeking the same kind of refuge. Ira flourished in that hidden place, becoming a child who moved easily between cultures. From Tarek and the elders, she learned the Apache ways, how to read the language of animals, how to honor the spirits of the land, how to live in balance with the world around her. From Lila and the other women of mixed heritage, she learned settler skills, reading from a handful of treasured books carried into the mountains, writing on slate with carefully saved chalk, tending gardens that now yielded more food than they once believed possible. Lila herself had changed both quietly and completely. Her body, once shaped by a settler's life, had grown lean and strong from mountain labor. Her hands, no longer those of a proper white woman, were rough, capable, and sure. Sun and wind had darkened her skin, and she wore her hair in the Apache style, decorated with beads and feathers that marked the turning points of her life. Most of all, she carried herself with the calm assurance of a woman who had found her place not through inheritance or convention, but through choice and endurance. The community marked the seasons with blended ceremonies, Christian prayers spoken alongside Apache rituals, settler hymns weaving together with the steady beat of native drums. The balance was imperfect, sometimes strained, but it was real. It honored the past while shaping something entirely its own. On a clear autumn morning, when the aspens burned gold along the mountainsides, Sani brought word of riders approaching a small group, moving openly along the valley trail, making no effort to hide. Tarek, now recognized as the community's leader, called a council to decide their response. Some urged immediate defense, old memories of forced removal, still sharp despite the years of peace. Others, including Lila, counseled restraint. The writer's openness suggested visitors, not enemies. In the end, Tarek and 3 warriors rode out to meet them, while the rest of the settlement prepared for either welcome or danger. Lila waited at the edge of the lodges with Ira beside her, one hand resting lightly on the knife at her waist, her gaze fixed on the trail. When the riders finally appeared, recognition struck her like a sudden blow. Riding near Tarek was Reed Lawson, older now, his beard streaked with gray, but unmistakably the same Indian agent who had confronted them years before. Ira pressed closer to her mother, sensing the tension. "Who is he?" the child asked in the Apache tongue, her dark eyes measuring the stranger with instinctive caution. "Someone from long ago," Lila replied, smoothing her daughter's wheat-colored hair. "From before you were born." When the riders dismounted, Lawson approached Lila, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that caught her off guard. "Mrs. Boone," he said, his voice carrying the same formal cadence she remembered. "It's been a long time, Mr. Lawson," she answered, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What brings you to our home?" Lawson looked around at the solid lodges, the thriving gardens, the clear signs of a people who had chosen their own way. Curiosity in part, he admitted, and official business of a different kind. Tarek joined them, his stance protective but calm. "You are welcome at our fire," he said carefully. "If you come in peace." "I do," Lawson replied, replacing his hat. "Much has changed since we last met. The government's view of the tribes is shifting." That evening, as the community shared a meal with their unexpected guests, Lawson explained further. He had left the Indian service years earlier, disillusioned by policies he had come to see as destructive. Now he worked with a circle of reformers, pressing for a new approach to relations with native peoples. "There are others like you," he told Lila and Tarek by the council fire. "Communities where different ways of living have found common ground. We document them, proof that another path exists beyond the reservations." Lila studied his face, searching for deceit and finding what seemed to be genuine resolve. "And you want to document us as well?" "With your consent," Lawson said. "Not your location that would remain protected, but your story. How you built this place. How you honored both traditions." Tarek's expression stayed guarded. "And what would that mean for us?" "For our children." Lawson sighed, his eyes drifting to where Ira and the other children played at the edge of the firelight, their laughter carrying into the dark. "I cannot promise that change will come quickly, or that everyone in government will see the world as I do." "Now," Reed Lawson said. "But I believe stories like yours can help shape a different future, one where there is room for many ways of being American." The word lingered between them. Lila Boone had not thought of herself as American for many years. In truth, she had stopped thinking much about nations at all. Her world had narrowed and deepened into this mountain community, her loyalty bound to the people who shared its risks and hopes. Later, after the visitors were settled into guest lodges and the camp quieted for the night, Lila walked with Tarek beneath the stars, speaking softly of Lawson's proposal. "Do you believe him?" Tarek asked, his voice low. "That telling our story could help others," Lila considered, before answering. "I believe he believes it," she said at last. "Whether it truly changes anything, the world beyond these mountains moves in ways we cannot foresee." Tarek nodded, lifting his gaze to the star-filled sky. "When I found you on the plains," he said quietly, "I did not know one life could alter so many others. Perhaps our story is worth telling, if only to show that such change is possible." Lila slipped her hand into his, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long habit. "Then we will tell it," she decided. "Not only for others, but for Ira and for the children who will come after her, so they know how we came to be." The next day, Lila sat with Lawson and spoke of her path from widow to Apache, wife from outsider to accepted member of the people. She spoke honestly of hardship and doubt, of misunderstanding and fear, but also of the gifts she had found of family, redefined of community, chosen of belonging, earned through living. As Lawson prepared to leave, promising to return in spring with news of his reform efforts, he asked one last question. Do you ever regret it, the life you might have lived, had you returned to civilization? Lila looked toward where Ira was helping Sani, now bent with age but sharp of mind, gather healing plants. Beyond them, Tarek worked with other men, repairing a lodge damaged by a recent storm. It was not the life she had been raised to expect, nor the future her parents would have imagined. No, she said simply, meeting Lawson's eyes with calm certainty. This is not the life I was born into, but it is the life I was meant for. As the visitors rode away, Lila stood with Tarek and Ira watching until they vanished along the trail. The autumn wind carried the scent of pine and wood smoke of earth preparing for winter's rest. High above, an eagle circled the clear blue sky, riding unseen currents with effortless grace. Will they come back? Ira asked, her small hand warm in Lila's. Perhaps, Lila answered, but whatever comes, we are ready. Tarek's arm settled around her shoulders, drawing her close. We are ready. He echoed, his voice carrying the same quiet strength that had first drawn her to him and had sustained them through every trial of building a life between worlds. Winter yielded once more to spring, the seasons turning in their ancient rhythm. On the morning of her 36th birthday, a date known only to her, Lila climbed to a favored overlook, a flat stone warmed by early sunlight. From there she could see the settlement spread below, larger now than when they had first arrived. New lodges stood beside the original circle, some built in the Apache way, others shaped like settler cabins. Gardens flourished in cleared spaces, and children played in the open center. Some dark-haired and dark-eyed, others marked by the varied shades of mixed heritage. Sitting on the sun-warmed stone, Lila removed a small bundle from the pouch at her waist. Unwrapping the soft hide, she revealed the objects she had carried through every turning of her life. The wooden eagle carved by the man who became her husband, the buffalo figure from Sani, the locket that once held her first husband's hair and now carried a small braid of Ira's baby curls. She added one more item, a folded letter brought by Lawson on his return visit, bearing news of slow but meaningful change. Policies were shifting. Tribes that maintained peace were being granted greater autonomy, more say in how they lived. It was incomplete, imperfect, but it was movement. Lila traced her fingers over each piece, the smooth wood, the cool metal, the fragile paper. Each marked an ending and a beginning. Footsteps sounded behind her. Tarek approached, his movements, still fluid though, silver now threaded his dark hair. Time had drawn lines around his eyes, but their depth remained unchanged, a gaze that saw beyond surface to what endured. Ira said you walk this way, he said, sitting beside her. His eyes fell on the object's recognition, passing over his face. Lila nodded, leaning into his solid presence. I was thinking of all the paths that led us here, she said, gesturing toward the settlement below, of how something new can grow from endings. Tarek's hand closed around hers, warm and steady. When I found you on the plains, he said softly, I believed I was saving one life. I did not know I was saving my own as well. The words carried the weight of shared years of struggle and choosing, of a community built of a daughter, raised between two traditions, and of a life forged, not by fate alone, but by courage and love. A voice carried up from below drew their attention. Ira, now a young woman, marked by quiet steadiness, was climbing the path toward them. A few steps behind came others, Sani leaning on her walking stick, yet stubbornly determined to walk on her own, followed by Willa Hart and Knox Hart with their 3 children and several familiar faces from the community Lila Boone had helped welcome over the years. They are gathering for the spring ceremony, Ira said when she reached them. They sent me to find you. Lila gathered the small treasures she had laid out, wrapping them with care before returning them to her pouch. Those objects belonged to her private past, but what they had helped create the people below, the daughter beside her, the future unfolding with each season, belonged to them all. As they began their descent toward the waiting circle, a deep sense of completion settled over her. The woman who had once collapsed in the Texas dust, ready to die, could never have imagined this life. The path from that moment to this one had been hard, demanding. She shed old certainties like a snake leaving its skin, calling forth courage she had not known she possessed. Yet walking between her husband and her daughter, surrounded by a community that embodied the best possibilities of two worlds, Lila knew down to her bones that every step had mattered, every trial worth enduring. At the edge of the gathering, she paused, taking in the sight before her faces turned expectantly. The ceremonial fire already burning sparks lifting into the clear spring sky. Tarek squeezed her hand, the pressure a silent question. "I was just thinking," Leela said softly, "how sometimes we must lose everything to find what we truly need." Ira slipped an arm around her mother's waist, her closeness a living reminder of all that had been gained. "And did you find it?" Mother Lila looked at her daughter's face, the seamless blending of herself and Tarek, of past and present, of worlds once believed impossible to join. Then her gaze moved to the community waiting to begin the ceremony that would welcome another spring, another turning of the cycle. "Yes," she said, stepping forward into the circle. "I found it, and so much more." As the drums began their steady heartbeat and voices rose in songs that bridged traditions, Lila took her place beside Tarek. The mountain wind carried the scent of pine and new growth of earth waking from winter's rest. High above, an eagle soared against the vast blue sky, not alone now, but flying with its mate, their wings riding the same currents, their paths aligned in quiet, perfect harmony. All stories are created for entertainment purposes and may include fictional elements or dramatized interpretations inspired by historical settings. We use AI tools, voiceover visuals, scripts as creative assistants. However, all content is reviewed, refined, and edited by humans to ensure emotional authenticity and storytelling quality. We fully comply with YouTube's policies regarding AI-generated content and do not use any deepfake techniques or misleading recreations of real individuals. All visuals and supporting materials are properly licensed. Sharing, re-uploading, modifying, or distributing any part of this content in any form requires written permission. We appreciate your support and a respect for original creative work.